All right, everyone, it's time to get serious in the Pac-12. Utah, USC, and UCLA, they made their statements last week. Arizona and Arizona State look to just hang in the race. And Oregon, is that really you? All right, Pac-12 breakdown. We come to your home every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Pacific time, 11 o'clock on the East Coast. And my distinguished panel this week, mainstays on the show. Love it. Don King from Last Word on Sports, Kaelen Jones from House of Sparky, and Mike W.R. from Gojo Bruin. I feel a little punch drunk. I've done two other of these shows here, so you guys are going to bail me out here soon.
We got you, Mark. We got you.
We're on it.
Very good. So statements by USC and UCLA last week, and those don't compare to what Utah did in shocking all of us, not necessarily just going to Eugene and winning, but putting up 62 points and shutting down that Oregon Duck offense. So, Don, let's start with you and your thoughts about last weekend's play.
Yeah, last week was wild. I'm going to start with a fact. 5 games pitted Pac-12 foes against one another. The road team won all 5. Home teams got skunked last weekend. It was wild, and it wreaked havoc on my picks because, I always think the home teams, I think there's no greater home field advantage than in college football, and boy, did that not prove out last weekend. And most of them got thumped. They didn't just lose, they just got absolutely worked. And you mentioned Oregon, and that's the shocker of the season, I think, not just of last weekend. Not just that they lost. I wasn't in a place where I would have been completely shocked to see Utah go up there and pull out a win. But to beat them by 42 on their own field, I mean, it was crazy. They were just going up and down the field, and the defense kept shutting the offense down. And I know Vernon Adams has the broken finger. I get that, but that wasn't, his effectiveness wasn't just broken finger related. They just got cold stopped, and the other guy didn't do much better either. So, that one was wild, and I'll admit, Mike W.R., I was very impressed with the showing your Bruins put up as well. That one I didn't see coming. Again, wouldn't have been surprised to see a win, but man, they looked fantastic.
So, yeah, Mike, we'll go straight to you with UCLA hammering Arizona.
Yeah, it was actually a shock because the first 3 games, UCLA has come out stronger in the second half. They have a good halftime adjustments, against even against UNLV, who they trounced. You saw in the first half that not everything was clicking, but in all 3 games, Virginia, UNLV, and BYU, they have done an impressive job in the second half. This time, they started strong, which was a bit of a shocker. I mean, Arizona helped out a little bit with 2 crucial fumbles, and you can definitely tell how significant losing their starting center is for the season is because of that. I think they had 4 or 5 bad snaps. 2 of them turned out to be fumbles, which UCLA recovered, which turned into touchdowns, and they scored 6 touchdowns in the first half, 4 in the second quarter. Josh Rosen was back. I think it was 250. I have my stats right here. It was just impressive. Let's see. My stats are there somewhere. But, Josh Rosen was just connecting on almost every pass. Now, there were a couple balls that were, thrown overhead or, just weren't as accurate. But for the most part, he looked as good as he did in Virginia. This was not a repeat of BYU, which, thank you. But the impressive one, even though he only had 85 yards, Paul Perkins was just a beast for UCLA. The offensive line has been amazing all year long. This game, they had a few guys, see through the cracks, on Arizona's defensive line, which got to Paul Perkins. But Paul Perkins is just so amazing that he takes the hit behind the line of scrimmage and forges forward and still manages to get 2 or 3 yards. If he's not doing that, if he's untouched, he's going for first downs. And after that first Arizona fumble, the very next play, Paul Perkins goes in for, I believe it was like a 16-yard touchdown run. So it's like, this guy's unstoppable. 85 yards, but 3 touchdowns. and he was running everywhere to the sidelines. You know, just like I said, he was trying to get as many yards after carry as possible, which he got a ton. I think it was something like 40 yards after carry. But the offense really impressed. Now, you know, they knocked out Anu Solomon, which, you know, I thought he was going to be a big factor, and, you know, unfortunately, you know, he took that, unfortunate hit. I really wanted to see him play this game through, but the backup, you know, another kind of crazy play. The next play after Solomon gets knocked out, Gerard. I'm blanking on his Gerard Randall runs, you know, for a 30-yard touchdown through this massive gap in the defensive line. So, you know, UCLA has some issues on the defensive line that they have to figure out this week. Because there were just some massive lines that they were just allowing. You know, UCLA allowed 353 yards rushing, and Jim Mora got on the team a bit for that. But, you know, overall, yeah, you know, thank you, Don. We were impressed too. We expected a close game. UCLA traditionally does not do well in Tucson. Under Mora in Tucson, UCLA is now 2-0, but it was quite impressive. I'm still shocked.
I believed in you. I thought it was going to be a Bruin blowout, but you did bring up the one warning sign. I was going to mention the rushing total for Arizona playing behind on the scoreboard. That there might have been a different storyline to this game and narrative in the second half had Arizona been within a couple scores instead of so far behind that they had to put it up against UCLA. We'll get back to that and the Bruins against Arizona State. We want to get to Kaelen. And I'm going to make you relive it one last time, Kaelen. Just one more time. Hang with me.
No, I mean, there's not too much to say, Mark. Unfortunately, Arizona State, they just were outmatched and outclassed by a more talented team, and ultimately they were outcoached. You're talking about a USC team that was practically baiting Arizona State in the third down plays, where USC would expect a total blitz where Arizona State sending 4, 5, 6, 7 players on a blitz, and Cody Kessler pretty much dinking and dunking, and then letting Adoree Jackson and Juju Smith run all over the field pretty much at will. And, you know, by halftime, it was 35-0, I believe. So there's not too much to say other than the fact that, unfortunately for Arizona State, the coaching staff still needs to figure out what they're going to do offensively, especially finding an identity. DJ Foster hasn't had any imprint whatsoever on this offense. And then they went away from the rushing game, which had been really successful throughout the game. Looking at the statistics, they found a lot of success running towards the tackles, not on the edge or up the middle, but against USC, they really found their way. Demario Richard, I believe he had 13 carries for over 100 yards. He's averaging over 6 yards a carry. This is a guy who ASU still needs to learn how to feature as their primary go-to back and nonetheless playmaker offensively. But you could tell Berkovici is still struggling in this kind of spread offense where he's not really a spread quarterback or a mobile guy at that. He's really a pocket passer who needs time to really settle down and get in a groove where he can get into a rhythm. And he really struggled against USC, who rarely sent any pass rush whatsoever. They sent about 4 guys, and they were still able to generate pressure. So ASU's offensive line is definitely in flux. I mean, there's not much more to say, unfortunately, for ASU other than that. They still need to figure out the kinks. Last season, though, luckily, and even the year before that, there were blowout losses last year, notably against UCLA at home. They got blown out and then ended up competing for the AFC South title before dropping it to Arizona. And then the year before, they actually ended up winning the Pac-12 South title. So there is hope, I guess, in Tempe. I guess that's the sort of way to be optimistic about moving forward. But unless this team figures out what they're going to do offensively, I don't know if ASU is going to be able to hang with the rest of the Pac-12. And to be honest, what I learned from this week in general was just that there's a separation between the mid-tier teams and the elite teams. I think you're talking about Utah, USC, UCLA. I'm probably forgetting a team. I'm blanking. But I think those 3 teams are for sure the clear-cut, or Stanford as well. I'm sorry, Don.
But I'm not sure of that yet. We'll see.
I think those 4 teams pretty much you have at the top of the conference, and then it's pretty much a fight for the rest of the mid-tier teams as well as the lower teams. And I think Cal has the chance to prove themselves, but not until they take on a legitimate opponent.
Yeah.
I was geared up to watch this game, Arizona State and USC. Sorry, Kaelen, I checked out sometime in the second quarter. It was still on the TV, but I was like looking at the computer, looking at highlights, doing all sorts of stuff. But reading between the lines in regards to what you had to say, plus looking at the stat sheet, plus what I remember from watching the game, the USC formula may not necessarily be the formula to beat Arizona State, meaning that USC didn't run the ball. They continued to pile it up through the air even when they had a big lead. So I don't know that many teams, if anybody left on the schedule, is going to have the type of explosiveness on the outside that USC brought and the precision passing of a Cody Kessler. So that may not necessarily be the formula to beat Arizona State, but we shall see coming up with Josh Rosen and company. Yeah. So with Stanford taking care of business on the road, Don, we took a look at it right after the game with Stanford looking very impressive in the second half. Oregon State putting up a fight in the first half. Your expectations for the Cardinal with Arizona coming to town?
Yeah, I think the real question is which Arizona team is going to show up, and it's really hard to know. It's early in the year. They didn't start off as sluggishly as they did last year, but haven't exactly set the world on fire either. The level of competition hasn't been great. And then they get a chance to kind of stand up and make a statement and get absolutely smoked at home. So that doesn't bode well. And the Solomon injury has got to be worrisome. I mean, we saw as good a runner as the backup is. There's a huge difference from a mastery of the offense standpoint and passing ability standpoint between their starter and the backup. So we're going to have to see how that works out, and if Solomon can go, and if so, how well he plays, having not practiced for most of the week. As far as I've heard, he's not back at practice yet, which doesn't necessarily bode well for the weekend. And of course, Stubby Wright is back out again for several weeks now with a foot injury right on the heels of that knee injury. So that doesn't help defensively. As far as Stanford goes, that was an impressive win at Oregon State, which is not always an easy place to play. And I think, Mark, we went back and forth on Twitter. In the first half, the Beavers were, they came out swinging a little bit and didn't look a lot like the team that had gotten run away from by Michigan up in Ann Arbor, but in the second half, I think it's just the physicality of Stanford and all those Shannon Turley trained athletes kind of wore down on them, and that was the most complete game by a Stanford offensive line I think we've seen since David DeCastro graduated. They were dominant, and it made it pretty easy, frankly, for McCaffrey and Barry J. Sanders and Ramon Wright to kind of do their thing on the ground. And sprinkle in a little bit of Hogan. He wasn't the nimblest guy coming off that high ankle sprain. Threw a couple of nice passes deep. Controlled passing game to the tight ends across the middle. Cooper was huge once again. So the formula is what the formula has always been. The backs are a little smaller, but the line is dominant. Hogan is playing pretty well, and it seems to have rediscovered his accuracy after week one. And it bodes fairly well. It's gonna. That said, I still remember the last Arizona game at Stanford Stadium was something like 54-46 or something stupid in double or triple overtime. I mean, it was ridiculous. There's a part of me that feels like that could happen again. Although obviously I'm hoping not to see that.
So for as much as what Kaelen said makes total sense, that there's been a separation between the top three and everybody else, especially since based on what we saw last week, we wouldn't be able to give Arizona State or Arizona a chance going on the road at UCLA and Stanford. We all know college football, and we see it week to week, and we know that teams, the ones that looked great last weekend aren't quite that great, and the teams that looked horrendous aren't quite that horrendous. So I wouldn't be shocked if one of these two games turns out to be rather close, if not an upset. I'll really pin down Mike and then Kaelen on the Arizona State-UCLA game. So again, based on last week's showing, considering USC and UCLA appear to be very comparable, we would expect this to be a rout at the Rose Bowl. But Mike, What are the concerns about UCLA, if you have any, based on the first 4 games?
Oh, there still a ton of concerns. I mean, I know they kind of became ESPN's darlings, and all these people kind of came out and said, "Oh, UCLA is a playoff contender. They're a top 10 team. Let's calm down a bit.
They're my
season."
darlings too, Mike. I picked them to go to the college football playoff when the season started.
I did too, but if that becomes, if that happens, I'm gonna completely freak out. But just looking at how this team has progressed, they're actually very, very good, despite losing a starting defensive lineman, a starting linebacker, and a starting second defensive back. Eddie Vanderdoes, Miles Jack, and Fabian Moreau are all out, and like I said, the defensive line really let Arizona create a lot of holes, and these weren't just small gaps that the offensive line was creating for Arizona. These were really, really big gaps, and UCLA could not get to the runners until they were 7-8 yards past the line of scrimmage. So that's definitely a concern, especially with Eddie Vanderdoes being out. And the other concern is their nose tackle, a guy who was on a couple of watch lists, Kenny Clark, been rather quiet. I hope to see that he improves in the next couple weeks, has a lot more production, but for the most part, the defensive line is a huge concern. Now, linebackers, Jayon Brown went out of the game, and Jim Mora has been quiet on if he's injured, if he's practicing, if he's coming back. So we don't even know about that. So if he's out, that's another linebacker that's injured. The defensive backs, what we saw last week with Fabian Moreau out and Ishmael Adams returning, that was one thing that went well for the Bruins roster-wise last week. They switched around a couple guys. Ishmael Adams kind of played that hybrid spot that Miles Jack sort of plays. Who was it? Randall Goforth came down from safety to corner, and Tahan Goodman came off the bench and played safety, and it worked in some cases, and others it didn't. Tahan Goodman, even though he was coming off the bench, he had a team high 10 tackles, so it's good that he was getting that involved in the game. But for the most part, a lot of those, a lot of the secondary had to really help. The defensive line, allowing all these rushers to run all over them. So that's going to be a big concern. Now on the offense, I'll make this quick. Paul Perkins, I think he's just a workhorse, and he's everyone's seeing exactly what Bruin fans have been talking about for the last year and a half. So there are no concerns there. The offensive line is great. The receivers are very good. We have a tight end who's making one-handed catches, one-handed catch touchdowns. so that's fantastic. Thomas Duarte has been really, really impressive this year, but there's still a concern about Rosen. Who are we going to get from week to week? Are we going to get the BYU Rosen, or are we going to get the Virginia Arizona Rosen? If we get a Rosen that is just solid, making like 70% of his passes, that's going to really help out UCLA. But if defensives find a way to get to him and they force him, to make bad passes, to mess around with his accuracy, and that could be a really big problem. I mean, it's not like it's a secret anymore. The kid's human, but on the opposite side, what exactly can he do? He definitely has a lot of potential.
So coming into the season, we had a Pac-12 South division that we considered, if not the best division in college football, we considered it as balanced, more balanced than any in college football. So the talent disparity, at least on the surface, doesn't appear to be that great, although USC, UCLA may be separating themselves. But the talent disparity isn't that great, but we see it all the time. When teams start to go downhill, we start to see whether the team has that much resolve and is the coach that good to keep it on the rails and keep it going. And when it starts to go good, that certain teams ride the momentum and become great teams when the talent isn't that much better than everybody else. So Arizona State's in a place where it could come off the rails. Todd Graham's an emotional guy. It was discussed during the game, and Kaelen's got a big smile, and he's ready to pounce on this one because I'll set you up here, Kaelen. Arizona State staring at a third straight loss. They're a pretty significant underdog here, but it's a talented team that is very capable.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. They are a talented team that is capable, and Mike actually touched on it. I think that the weaknesses that Arizona State has to exploit is really primarily the running game. They need to feed to Mario Richard. He's proven again and again that he's the most consistent offensive threat that Arizona State has. And then not only that, defensively, they need to just come after Josh Rosen. It's different with Cody Kessler and Steve Sarkisian. They've seen what Arizona State and Todd Graham's defenses have cooked up before, and they knew exactly how to pick him apart. Coming in against a true freshman in Rosen, we know that he's human, and this is a really aggressive and a smart defensive head coach in Todd Graham, who's been known for dictating the way that opposing offenses play instead of letting opposing offenses dictate what he does. And I think he's going to take every opportunity and chance to come after Rosen heading into this game. It is concerning, though, that they do have the playmakers of Thomas Duarte down the middle of the field, which I still think is a weakness considering ASU. They've been rotating around with safeties. True freshman Kareem Orr stepped in last week as the starter, and then before that, I think Armand Perry, who was named the season starter, is still injured, so he won't be there this week. But not only Duarte, but Paul Perkins as well. USC didn't really hammer the ball against us, but Texas A&M's Trey Carson really found some running lanes against us. Then against Cal Poly and New Mexico, while they didn't have consistent success, could be that they ran a triple option, they still were able to pound the ball pretty effectively against ASU. So it'll be interesting to see how Perkins performs against us this week. But I really think that ASU, if they're going to have any chance at winning this game at all, they're going to have to exploit, one, the run game offensively, and then two, defensively, just come after Rosen with everything that they got if they want a shot at really turning the season around. But at the same time, I could see UCLA just dominating the way that they did against Arizona and really putting the nail in the coffin for ASU season.
Hey, Don, while we're on the subject of matchups, when I think Arizona defense, regardless of the great job that Rich Rod has done in bringing Arizona to status of contention in the Pac-12 and winning the Pac-12 South last year, when I think Arizona defense, and last week was the classic display of just getting pushed around all over the field, not being tenacious, not being nasty on defense, not wrapping up tackles, not wanting and always being willing to mix it up and be tenacious and tough, blowing coverages. This is ready-made for Stanford football to push people around.
It's possible, and I'll tell you, and I will say what I saw, and I was flipping around, with all the different games, Oregon, Arizona and Arizona State, all of those teams in their stadiums, kind of getting whipped on that night. But what I saw is reflective of what you just said. I think to no small degree, Arizona is missing old two-star Scoob's leadership and toughness on the field every bit as much as they're missing his talent. And that talent's considerable. But, that team played with no defensive attitude whatsoever. And if they show up like that on Saturday, they're going to get their brakes blown off. It'll be one of those 47-minute time of possession type things, where Stanford just marches down the field and the defense gets a stop or two, and they just, roll down and score, over and over again. So they're going to have to find some stiffness, or they will get pushed around. To the point that you made earlier, this is a weird game. The ball is shaped funny. It takes strange bounces. I just don't think we're going to see, exactly what we would expect based on what we saw last week. But because, clearly Stanford has shown this season that it's capable of laying an egg. USC has shown this season that it's capable of laying an egg. I mean, we don't know exactly who's going to show up from week to week. And both UCLA and Stanford are 14-point home favorites. And to the point you made, one of those games is going to likely be far closer than that. The question is which one and why. We're going to have to watch them and wait and see.
This is basically a full-time job for these kids. They lift a ton of weights. They run. They work their butts off. They watch a lot of film. They go through two-a-days. They go through spring practice, summer drills. They got a lot of pride. So I expect a bounce back from any particular team that looked bad on the national stage the week before. So it's time for predictions. And as we go through the predictions, guys, we have not mentioned Cal hosting Washington State. Jared Goff, exceptional, off to a 4-0 start. And also Oregon. We're doing a Pac-12 show. We've been going here for 25, 26 minutes. We have not mentioned the Oregon Ducks. One game has completely obliterated Oregon football.
Yeah,
I expect a little bit more from the Oregon Ducks off of what Don just mentioned, talking about teams showing up or being completely Jekyll and Hyde, different teams. We're going to hear from the Ducks from the rest of the season. There's no question about that. But they go to Colorado, and maybe the Buffs have not arrived, but they are off to a 3-1 start and one of those wins over a decent Colorado State team. So why don't I, instead of going through all the games with each one of you, I'll throw out a game. We'll start with Don. We'll go to Kaelen. We'll finish up with Mike. And again, if you guys want to chime in specifically on Washington State, Cal, and Oregon, Colorado, or anything else, definitely do so. So, Don, let's start with Washington State going to Cal to take on the 4-0 Golden Bears.
Yeah, Wazoo is going to get smoked. I actually have more confidence in this game than in any of the other ones going on this weekend. I think Cal has found a little bit of swagger. The defense has not been as horrendous. Hasn't been great, but not as horrendous. And that offense is really, really dangerous. And on top of that, they seem to be relatively even-keeled about going about their business. Last week's win, I thought, was huge for them. Huge, because that one, frankly, could go either way. Washington was at home, and that's a decent team. And Cal was able to not do the typical Cal thing and was able to go up there and get out to a lead and hold on to that lead and put the game away. I think they're going to destroy Washington State. That's the good news for them. The bad news for them is after that they have 4 straight games against upper division teams, and that could be rocky. So I think they're really focused on getting bowl eligible. This gets them to 5-0, and they only need one more win the rest of the season to get there. I think they're going to come out fairly determined, resolved at home, and I think they're going to put a whooping on Washington State.
Don, I think that's a great point. The two teams that Cal just beat, make no mistake, they're very flawed teams in Washington and Texas.
Yep.
But they played 2 rosters that probably have a collection of 20 NFL players.
Yep.
So they played teams with talent, and they would have lost these games in the last 3 to 4 years, if not even before that. So they won 2 consecutive games, were able to bounce back from a big win at Texas, come back and win a conference game against a formidable team. So, yeah, Washington State at Cal, Kaelen.
I agree with Don. I'm taking Cal. I'm nervous to say they'll run away with it because last year's game they won by 1 point. It was 60-59, I guess. Yeah. But again, Jared Goff, he's unbelievable. I was actually watching the Washington game before I caught all the later games, and the way that he shredded Washington's defense. Granted, they are a young group. The way that he was just throwing the ball. There's one where he throws in, he tightropes a pass to put them up. I think it's 10-3, and I just thought it's over after he made that pass. So he's definitely a special guy. He's definitely a special player. And then you're surrounding him with the playmakers that he does, and Lawler. Man, I'm drawing a blank. They're too deep at running back as well because Kalfini Muhammad got hurt, or Lasco got hurt. And Muhammad came in, and it's a talented offense. I'll just say that. But I'll take Cal in this one.
I may actually, when we jump off here, go look at some Washington State box scores because now that Connor Halliday's left, I got to think that they're still throwing like 65 passes a game, and those are usually interesting box scores to look at. You know, the 45 for 63 day by the quarterback, and the rushing attack goes like 11 carries for 13 yards.
Yep.
So, Mike, what do you have with the Cougars taking on the Golden Bears?
I am just impressed with Cal with what they're doing. Their offense is just outstanding. You know, they could definitely they've definitely taken it to another level. I can't speak. I'm sorry. And
I'm right there with you, Mike.
We're seeing this year how Sonny Dykes' offense is coming together a little bit. I even have a Cal friend who just wrote off Cal last year, and this year he's like, okay, maybe I was a bit wrong. But I mean, you can see the progression with how well the offense is doing. The defense, obviously, they need to improve a little bit, but for the most part, Cal is just, give them a hand clap for that one because they're doing really well. Washington State, though, they're 2-1, but they had a weird win.
Not really. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wyoming, us four collectively could beat Wyoming, and they lost to Portland State. Portland State. So
Yeah.
definitely, I don't. Washington State is still Washington State, and this is going to be all Cal.
Okay, Mike, we'll stay with you since we go to the next game and it's close to your heart. UCLA could be 5-0 after Saturday. 5-0. I don't know the last time UCLA was 5-0. It may not have been that long ago. I know that they had a big 10-1 start, 10-0 start about 10 years ago with Maurice Jones-Drew, a running back. Might have been more like 12 or 13 years ago. But anyway, UCLA not getting off to a lot of 5-0 starts since the Cade McNown era, hosting Arizona State.
I got UCLA in this one. I mean, things are just trending upwards for UCLA. It's at home. Arizona State just looks out of sorts. At least they did with USC. And this team is just resilient. They're tough. They're deep. And if they can stop getting injured, I think they're actually going to go far. But let's take it one step at a time. I got UCLA over Arizona State.
They're going to the college football playoff, remember.
All
right, Arizona State, time to turn it around at the Rose Bowl.
I don't think it'll happen. I think UCLA is going to be able to come away with that one pretty easily, actually. I think ASU is still trying to figure out, again, their identity offensively, and until they could find any rhythm whatsoever, and who knows, maybe they turn it around this week, but I don't see it happening.
All right, Don, a chic college football playoff contender in Arizona State taking on a current one in UCLA.
Yeah, I'm going to take Arizona State in the upset. No, I'm just kidding. UCLA is going to win this game. I will say I have been more disappointed this season so far in Mike Bercovici than any other single player in the conference. There's no health issues, none of that kind of stuff. It's not like he hasn't been on the field, but I really thought he might even have been an upgrade over Taylor Kelly, and it just hasn't worked out that way. And it could be, what Kaelen was talking about earlier. It could be a case of lack of fit with the offensive scheme, but I tell you, he seemed to play in it just fine last year, so I'm not 100% sure what it is. Maybe the offensive line is just that bad, and it's not enough time for him to do what he does the way he does it. I don't know. I do think the team will show up and put forth an effort. I don't think they're just going to get rolled for the second consecutive week, but I don't see how they go into the Rose Bowl and beat that UCLA team this weekend.
Okay, Don, we'll stay with you. Has Oregon taken its next step toward going to the Las Vegas Bowl with the loss against Utah? Byron Marshall on the shelf, 2-2 record. They go to Colorado.
Yeah, it's a good question. I will tell you the coach I'm most disappointed in is Mark Helfrich. I really thought he was higher quality than that, and I don't know. Maybe there's a bit of mental weakness in this team. It seems like they really didn't handle that Michigan State loss well at all. You would think they would bounce out of us. All we have to do is run, but nope, that didn't look to be the case. All that said, I don't see them going to Colorado and getting beat. But I think there's some soul searching that's going to happen, or they're looking at a Las Vegas Bowl bid, or worse. They're going to have to pull it together, and they have to pull it together kind of quickly because there are still a lot of really tough football teams they're going to have to face this year and the rest of the way.
It's funny, I jotted down the schedule here. I've got Oregon 3-1 and Colorado 3-1. My subconscious wouldn't even let me write Oregon 2-2 down.
Right.
So, Kaelen, we've got the Ducks going on the road to Boulder.
I think it'll be closer than most people expect. I know the line is set at 7, which my friend was asking me about betting on. I'm like, I'll definitely take Oregon in that for sure. But I think it'll only be like a 2-possession game, if that. I think Oregon, the way that they just fell apart against Utah was really concerning. They lose Byron Marshall, like you said. They still need to figure out the quarterback situation. I think Vernon Adams has really struggled. Jeff Locke hasn't looked that much better either. But I think Colorado, they'll give them a fight in the sense that they won't get blown out. So I still have Oregon in that one.
Okay, I've encouraged you guys in the past to pick these games against the spread. Then if somebody gets hot, we can boost the ratings. That will do it like nothing else. Okay, Mike, we've got the Ducks going on the road to Boulder.
Yeah, I was going to throw out that stat too. You know, the Ducks are only favored by a touchdown. You know, seven points. But that's weird. You wouldn't have seen that in previous years. No matter where Oregon went to on the road, you know, they would still be, you know, unless it was a ranked team, UCLA,
Even then,
going
yes.
to Colorado.
Even then.
Just threw that out. Oregon was usually favored by double digits against the second best team in the conference.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. But it's, you know, that's the way the world is now. Oregon is 2-2. They're only 7-point favorites at Colorado. Now, Colorado is in the same boat for me as Washington State. Is, you know, they're 3-1, impressive, really proud of them. You know, way to back the pack. But also, it's been against, you know, weaker teams. Nicholls State, Massachusetts. You know, they lost to Hawaii. Bad play on that, but for the most part, you know, you lost to Hawaii. They lost the entire game just in the last moment. But I think Oregon is going to come out a little bit pissed off and, you know, try to find, you know, if they have no identity, you know, it's time to start looking for it. So I think Oregon is going to do that on this Colorado trip, especially, you know, they're probably not looking at stats or headlines. Some of them probably do, but to see that they're only a touchdown favorite at Colorado, that might add some fuel to their fire. So I think Oregon's going to win, but I think it'll be maybe a 2 or 3 touchdown affair.
I've got a historical fact. The last time that Oregon started 2-2 was 2009. They went to the Rose Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
All right, Mike, let's finish off with Arizona going to Stanford. The Cardinal looking like a different football team the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's just, you know, just the way that Stanford just ran through USC last week or the previous week just is still sticking with me. And what they did, you know, against Oregon State was, you know, it's Stanford. You know, they're back in a sense. You know, as coming back from that Northwestern game. And Arizona, you know, I'm still shocked that they were. I thought I was going to be a little bit more impressed than I was, and it doesn't help that they're just dropping like flies, like worse than UCLA. You know, first string quarterback, Scooby Wright's out. Their center, you know, other notable linebackers, and right now I think they're just going to be limping into Stanford, and you know, Cardinal will get the win on this one.
All right, Kaelen, let's set you up with the Wildcats going to Stanford to take on the Cardinal.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in sync with what Mike said. You're looking at a really injured Arizona group, and Stanford is a really physical team. So I really see Stanford coming away with the win, especially considering the way that Hogan has been playing. And then you're talking about McCaffrey and Sanders Jr. They've been really impressive as well. So I'll take Stanford in that one too.
All right, Don, finish us off. The Cardinal hosting Arizona.
I've got Stanford, but close. I think it's a one-score game. I think it's, you know, 3 or 7, and I think it's still a game in the fourth quarter. And I hope against hope I'm wrong. I think this one's going to be a little tougher than it looks like it ought to be on paper. We'll see what happens. The biggest problem Arizona's got is the injury, and if Solomon can't play, it's going to be a lot tougher. With a week of film on the backup, I do trust Lance Anderson to have a very solid defensive game plan ready for him in case he's the guy who goes. Solomon has another dimension just because of that strong arm of his. So it's one of those that looks like it shouldn't be that tough. You know, the line is still 14 points. I just don't trust it at all. So I think it's Stanford by a score late.
Our buddy Jack Fullman from Pacific Takes is taking down our picks, so they're on record. All right, we've got Don King from Last Word on Sports, Kaelen Jones from House of Sparky, and also Mike W.R. from Gojo Bruin. 4 teams from the Pac-12 have a bye week, so we've got the 4 games with 8 teams in play. From here on out, guys, deepest conference in college football. Arguably, we are going to have great matchups to talk about from now until the Pac-12 championship game. Guys, always appreciate the insight.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.